Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbalo here in Lagos. Well, Nigeria's First Lady, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, is back in the country, and she said all the rumors are not true. You know what those rumors are, right? And you know why this is a headline news? It is perhaps because of some of the online stories over the last week, some of the stories that have been regarded now as fake news. The president's wife was being away from the country for some time, and she explained the reasons she was away from the country amidst the many online gossips.
Last year, if you could remember, I was in Spain for 2 months with my daughter. I've never abandoned my children. I give them the motherly support they needed. And usually we normally go for a holiday every year for 6 weeks. I've taken my holiday for this year, and it happens that after the holiday, I need to attend to my health before going to Saudi. And when I went to Saudi, based on the doctor's instructions, I went back to UK again, and I'm well now, but still I need more rest. And I would like to seize that opportunity to thank my husband for approving 6 ASS and also PS to my office to allow me to attend to the home front and also some developmental projects in Nigeria for women and children. As you have seen that I've just arrived, is it 5 a.m. or what? I've just arrived with the British Airways. You are all around here to welcome me. The video was an old video. The event happens, it was me. Actually, it happened in the villa.
Okay, then you've heard from the horse's mouth. Well, you know, it's an idiom, not in the real sense of it. But you've heard from her and some of those stories that are generated. That's not what we are staying on tonight. We're discussing more political policy and governance related issues tonight. So let's get on. And tonight, our attention is on the issue, first and foremost, on the issues of the budget, issues of anti-corruption. That's what we'll first talk about tonight. And you remember what President Muhammadu Buhari and the APC said they want to tackle. Anti-corruption is one of those three major agenda. And after 2015 term, they did say they want to consolidate on those plans that they had in 2015. So a lot has happened over the past week. President Muhammadu Buhari and the APC, on assumption of office, had said that they want to fight corruption. So during the week, Professor Issa Sage says the Bukola Saraki-led 8th National Assembly has been a wedge in the wheel of the federal government fight against corruption. Professor Sage is the chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee Against Corruption. He spoke after the committee members met with President Muhammadu Buhari at the State House in Abuja. Mr. Sage said recoveries of up to 1 trillion naira was made locally from looters, while the fight against corruption, according to him, is on course.
The capacity of corruption to fight back has been reduced with the expiration of the life of the 8th Assembly, because that is where the main opposition to this government was constituted, main opposition to the fight against corruption. That was the center. And at that stage, at that time, it did not depend on which party they belonged to. They all ganged up together against the fight against corruption and did everything they could to frustrate the government and ourselves in this fight.
You heard from Professor Sage there. Let's get some insight on this matter. It's partly legal, it's partly on the issues of governance. I have joining me tonight, perhaps one of the most senior lawyers in Nigeria, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Chief Robert Clarke. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Chief Clarke.
Always my pleasure.
Let me begin by asking you, based on what Professor Sage said. He said the Saraki-led 8th National Assembly was like a wedge in the progress of the fight against corruption in the 8th National Assembly, that is in the last 4 years. Do you agree with him?
As much as I would have wished to agree with the professor, I think it's rather a very sweeping statement. Because if you make a statement that the whole Eighth Assembly were fighting, corruption or using corruption as a tool to fight other things, it will be, a statement that needs to be proved. I don't know what evidence he has. I know he's a very good lawyer, and maybe he has facts which I don't have. But I believe, and I agree with him, that some or the leadership of the Eighth Assembly could be described with that tag that he has now given the whole Assembly. I think it is not fair to place the tag on the whole Eighth Assembly. But I will agree with him that I can tag some of them who can be categorized in this act.
You partly agree that what Professor Sage said is true, that some of the lawmakers in the last 4 years in the Eighth Assembly were actually, could be tagged as for corruption fighting back the system.
Definitely. I can say that I agree with him that some of them, not all, he had generalized it as if the whole Assembly was involved. No, I don't accept that, except he has facts. But I agree with him that the leadership of the Fourth Assembly could be tagged as such.
The leadership.
The leadership.
I mean, what gives you this impression?
Look, as a man who has seen many things, this is my own personal opinion, and I need to be proved wrong. I am speaking from my own experience, from what I've been hearing, from what I've been seeing, and I have formed my own conclusion that Professor Sage is correct, but to the extent that it is not the whole Assembly, but, the core leaders of the Assembly.
So if this is true, based on what you have said and what Professor Sage has said, because Professor Sage is leading a committee that is directly working with the president on the fight against corruption. That means he has a lot of facts to work with. That means we really are in trouble, isn't it? Because government, some of these people are powerful people. They could be referred to as government themselves. So in that sense, the fight against corruption is a tough one, isn't it?
It's a very tough one in Nigeria. Let me be honest. The government of today in Nigeria, operating the 1999 Constitution that allows corruption to rear its head in every field of endeavor, cannot be fighting corruption when the same system they're operating is the one creating corruption. Let me be clear on it. You have a government that is fighting corruption, whereas the system you are operating to fight the corruption is also breeding corruption. The system allows corruption to thrive. You have a system that allows anybody in power, no matter what grade, to be looting the treasury. It is the system, and you are operating it. So you have to look at yourself. Where in this system I'm operating is not allowing me to fight corruption, and let me see what I can do about it.
So the corruption fight is a joke from that point of view?
It is a bloody joke. Bet my language. It is a joke. It can never be eradicated because it emanates from the system. It emanates from the system.
So what would you have suggested then that President Muhammadu Buhari, who says, I want to fight corruption, in the first place, do you see sincerity in that kind of person, in the person of President Muhammadu Buhari, in wanting to fight corruption, in all of the steps and moves he had made and his government and the APC?
I give him kudos. I think he's on the right track. But as I said, he's handicapped by the nature of government he's leading. If you have a constitution that allows an NGO to have so much money and they don't account for it, if you have a constitution where your head of service is siphoning money and you don't know about it until it is discovered, if you have a governor that worked for 8 years, and from 8 years tenure, he goes into prison, and nobody talks about it. You find, so many instances where officials in this government, within the past 20 years, have been siphoning money, and nothing has happened.
From your perhaps 5 decades, you've been practicing law for about 50 years now.
Yeah, almost 50 years.
I mean, from your experience, what would you regard as perhaps the most ridiculous part of our laws that allows corruption to thrive?
You see, it is not the laws. The laws are made to regulate. The Constitution is the cancer worm that is eating up us in corruption. The Constitution we are operating upon is a corrupt Constitution. It's a rotten egg. And until it is terminated, and if Buhari wants to help Nigeria, sincerely, to have a name that he tried to stop corruption, he could not. But at least the funnel or the tunnel from where corruption comes from, he has been able to close it, restructure Nigeria, change the Constitution, remove all these areas where governors are giving security votes. Nobody exercises control over them on how they spend money. Let us change the Constitution and restructure, because governance in Nigeria is taking 80%. That's what the new budget has told us. Why should we be spending 80% of our revenue on government expenses? We have to look inwards. Look, let me tell you, when China in 1947 wanted to start on them as a tongue, they looked inwards. How did they look inwards? They closed all their borders. They went on agriculture. India in 1947 went inwards for 20 years. By 1960, India was able to feed itself. Population then was 800 million. By closing their borders, by looking inwards. If Nigeria wants to restructure Nigeria today, we don't need a deficit budget. Why are we relying on that? When today, by executive order, Buhari can say, okay, 50% of the NGOs, I am scrapping them. 50% of my special assistants.
You mean MDAs, the ministry, the Ministry and Department of and agencies, right?
Yeah. Look at my advisors and special assistants. I am cutting it by 50%. And let every other governor and everything. By the time we cut all this, we will have made about 20% of the budget deficit that we are going about to borrow. So we need to sit down and beg Buhari, make an executive order, bring up a new panel to look into the Constitution. Let us decide, send it to the Parliament or to National Assembly. I have this proposal. Pass a law so that whatever recommendations they give me, let me send it directly to Nigerians on a referendum. Whatever decisions Nigeria make, I will hand it over to you to make it into law. But you know the irony? The people who are eating and eating every day from this system of governance, well, they are not going to allow it.
So I mean, Chief Clarke, you were saying if President Buhari takes that bold move, because from the way you're describing it, it does look at an audacious move. So if he does take that move, he's probably going to have done what in history he will be forever remembered for, isn't it?
He will be remembered. But it is not a question of corruption fighting him. No. He has all the powers.
Well, how easy is it for the suggestion you're making today? Because a lot of people have made noise about it. A lot of people talked about it, that there's a need to restructure Nigeria. The constitution that we are operating is a military, born out of a military design. And a lot of people have said, look, let us fix this constitution. So how easy is it to do that?
Look, when Obasanjo created the constitutional whatever that he wanted, he never laid a foundation for any legal basis upon which the recommendations will be implemented. Jonathan fell into the same, trick. He created a constitution, brought in people, spent millions and billions, and yet he never created a legal basis upon which, if there is any recommendation, it will become law. Buhari should not make that mistake. As soon as he creates this thing, send a bill to Parliament. I am setting up a panel to look into restructuring and a new constitution. We are tired of this old one. But please, pass a bill, which I will assent to, that whatever decision this panel gives me, I will send it to Nigerians. If they approve it, I will now bring it back to you, and you have no alternative than to make it into law.
But do you think, based on what we have now, that a crop of the political elite we have in Nigeria will allow for a total overhaul of our constitution?
Look, they have no alternative. If the will on Buhari is there, and God will give him that will, I am praying, because Nigeria is going, in 5 years' time, I am not joking, Nigeria is going to be burning. I am not joking. Poverty is too much, and we are not creating opportunities. How can we bring a budget when 80% of the budget is to pay, allowances and on governors? When even out of 100% of this budget, we are borrowing. Why can't we start and say, civil servants, public officers, no allowances, this one, we look inwards like China did, like India did. By Jove, what we will collect will have been more than the 20% we are borrowing.
So, I mean, in essence, the Senator Rochas Okorocha's suggestion, he said Nigeria does not need 3 senators per state, does not need more than 3 hours of breath per state. Perhaps that, you heard what he said, Rochas Okorocha.
I will say we don't need senators.
Okay.
We don't need senators. You see, the presidential system of government brought in by Obasanjo, on the United States, the United States of America has money. They print currencies, international currency, so they can afford the luxury of these governors. And we have seen the benefit to them. The rule of law, till today, is still persisting in America. But we cannot afford that luxury.
So you are suggesting a unicameral legislature?
Yeah, unicameral legislature. Again, we have to reduce the amount of money politicians spend in attaining power. Do you know that for a gubernatorial candidate to get nomination alone, he spends over 5 billion in the party? Do you know, again, when he's contesting for a general election, he spends another 5 billion. So you don't blame them when they get as executive governor, they start stealing. It is the system that allows it. So if we have a legislature that says everybody campaign in your local government, don't ask for Nigeria's vote, ask for your own king's vote. That will reduce the amount of money, that will reduce many things. And then the party can then bring a leader when you get to Parliament as the president or as anything that you want.
So, in essence, as we wrap up this conversation at this point, when the Transparency International gave its report on Nigeria and the perception of on corruption, so it's not untrue that the fact that the Buhari government says it's fighting corruption, but the figures we're getting from these international bodies are not reflecting that war.
Look, you and I see what is happening. The government of Buhari that is fighting corruption, most of its top officials are stealing. Governors are being sent to jail. Governors are moving from the state house into courts to answer charges. The head of service is being dragged to court. That's part of Buhari's, then how can you fight corruption? The transparency people are quite correct.
There's a question I'd like to ask you. I would have allowed you to go, but stay with us, Chief Clarke. We'll take a break. Up next on the program, the PDP is alleging that the Buhari federal government is gagging the media, subjugating Nigerians and curtailing their constitutionally guaranteed freedom of expression. How true is that? We take a look at that from both sides of the coin, and we also allow the senior advocate in the studio to weigh in on that. Join us again, everyone.